Good morning, everyone. It's 1 after the hour, depending on what time zone you're in. We'll be getting started here in a couple of minutes. Wait for any stragglers to join, and we'll be getting started here in a couple of minutes. Good morning or afternoon, everyone. This is Dylan Bowders. I'm a solutions engineer with RapidScale, and we'll go ahead and get going here with our last webinar of 2017. Thank you for everyone who has joined. Today, we're going to go over and kind of recap the technology that we introduced into our portfolio in 2017, and then briefly talk about some things that we have in mind for 2018. And as always, if there are any questions, please type those into the question box within the GoToMeeting dialog toolbox or toolbar. And also this will be recorded and available in our partner portal if you want to review it after the fact, or for some reason you can't be on for the entire presentation. Shouldn't really take more than about 30 minutes or so, and then get everybody back to their day. So again, thanks for joining. And if you don't have partner portal access, please email our marketing team at marketing@rapidscale.net. All right, 2017 technology recap. First thing we're going to cover is SD-WAN. This was actually initially something that we were projecting to release towards the latter half of this year. And due to customer demand, we actually brought it on board earlier than initially planned. But we were happy to do so. We had already planned on introducing it. SD-WAN is for us at least, is a complement to our existing services. We didn't really bring it on board because we wanted to compete with SD-WAN providers. It was more because we want to better deliver the applications and services that we already provide our customers, or that we typically are proposing to new prospects. So why SD-WAN? The things that it can do for us is it gives us the ability to identify specific applications or specific traffic, and then provide more resilient transport over commodity-based internet services, cable modems, maybe Ethernet services, DSL, LTE, really any mix of direct internet access. We take a combination of those different types of circuits, and then we leverage the best of those circuits for the priority traffic, and then the rest of the circuits, depending on the policy that we create, the rest of the circuits for maybe just general browsing or other types of traffic. Of course, that tunnel is encrypted, so there is security, and because we're leveraging the best of those paths, that is higher performance as well. So, for instance, if we're delivering desktop as a service, which I would call our flagship product, when that packet is transmitted from our data center, it's going to have at least two options for being delivered to the end client, or the person that's requesting that on the other end of the SD-WAN connection. That packet's going to be transmitted simultaneously over both of those, or all 3 or 4 of those paths, and whichever one is received first is the one that's processed. So that's how we're more reliably delivering those applications. So if for some reason we're delivering that packet over 2 connections and there's packet loss on one of those upstreams, doesn't really matter, because we're going to probably drop that packet anyway, because it was delivered first from the other connection. So just kind of a very general, very high overview of how that works. So some of the features that come with SD-WAN, talked about a couple of those: WAN virtualization, WAN optimization, the deployment. Once we've gone through the architecture and the design of it in a pre-sales perspective, pre-sales process, or in some cases in the post-sales implementation process, the actual implementation is pretty straightforward. We have main the main control nodes that would be deployed as virtual instances in our cloud. And then we have the physical appliances, in most cases, physical appliances that are deployed at the premises, where we have the multiple physical connections to the diverse upstream providers. So that deployment is very straightforward. Plug it in, it registers up to the main control nodes, and then those control nodes basically deliver the policy down to those end devices. So that's also kind of gives you an idea of the centralized policies. There is hypervisor support, so we're deploying those into our VMware environment from a virtual perspective. But if the customer at their premises has highly available and highly resilient physical infrastructure, and we want to use a virtual instance there, we can do that as well. And there are some integrated firewall components to that as well. A lot of times what we'll do is actually backhaul the customer's traffic from their remote locations into our facility. And again, we don't charge for bandwidth. So it's not like you're being double charged for bandwidth, not only at your premises, but also in our facility going in and out. In our case, we don't charge you for bandwidth. So it can make sense to backhaul all of the remote site traffic into our facility, single point of control for things like content browser filtering, VPN, and some other things. So one of those design options that we have for deploying those. So we touched on a couple of things here with SD-WAN. Reduce cost for dedicated circuits, MPLS circuits, while we can actually leverage MPLS as an option. In most cases, it doesn't usually make sense to do that. If we're doing that, it's because there's maybe some time left in a contract. They can't necessarily cancel the circuit. So we want to leverage that circuit for some period of time and then eventually move off of it. And that can happen pretty seamlessly once we have the SD-WAN solution in place. Improved availability, delivering applications more reliably. And then if you, in scenarios where maybe you had a big contract with one of the big telco providers for MPLS services, you kind of have vendor lock-in in that scenario. You've got a long-term contract, you've got vendor lock-in, and not a whole lot of options when it comes to changing and evolving your WAN design. With SD-WAN, we remove the dependency of that telco circuit, and typically you don't have contracts. A lot of times you don't have contracts with direct internet service, whether it's cable or other types of services. So if for some reason you have a lot of outages, maybe you had a bad customer support experience with that upstream provider, cable provider, you can order new service through another provider, and we can manage swapping out those circuits. And again, pretty seamless, if not completely seamless, to your end users and the applications that are being delivered, because you have other services that are also being leveraged by that SD-WAN. Next topic, cloud security. We did a lot of work in cloud security this year, bringing on products that we felt were really complementary to our already tried and true products and services. So again, desktop, infrastructure as a service, disaster recovery as a service. Cloud security really kind of layers on top of that. We did a webinar on cloud security earlier this year and talked more in depth about those specific products. For this recap, we're really more focusing on the Encapsula cloud-based security product for web and also DDoS mitigation, and then also the Alien Vault security product. So if you're thinking about this conceptually, and I don't have a graphic in this slide deck here, but if you think about it conceptually, think of a neighborhood where you have a house, you have a perimeter gate around the neighborhood, and you have all of the people outside of your neighborhood. We want to try and block people before they get into your neighborhood, if they're malicious, if they're not validated as guests and as legitimate traffic. So we want to do that, and we're going to do that with services like Mimecast and Encapsula and a couple of others. Encapsula will block any kind of malicious web traffic and then just pass through the clean traffic to the internal servers. Now, once we get traffic into the internal environment, of course, we want to do what we can to never have an exploit or any kind of vulnerabilities inside of our network that could be maliciously exploited. But if we do, we want to know about it. So this would be the scenario where you have a home security system, glass break sensors, via a video camera at your door, motion sensors inside, video recorder, so that if somebody does get inside your house, you know about it. That's where Alien Vault comes in, and with both of those services, they're fully managed by RapidScale and our Security Operations Center, and they can also help you gain compliances for things like PCI and HIPAA. So some of the features: web content acceleration. Well, I guess we'll start on the left-hand column first. So unified security management features, asset discovery. This is important when you have 5 virtual machines, 500 virtual machines, and someone deploys a new asset inside of that environment. There's a new IP address that's responding to traffic, and our system will flag that and ask that we identify it and classify it. Of course, if it was done maliciously somehow, then we're going to identify that something has just happened, and we'll take action on it. We'll remediate that. For Security Information and Events Manager, this is a big one, and these products can be very expensive if you go out and just secure licensing for a purpose-built Security Information and Events Manager, or SIEM. It's one of the components in our Alien Vault-based cloud security product, and again, completely managed by RapidScale and our team, so that the end user, your customer, or your environment is safe, and we're responsible for identifying these threats and leveraging the Alien Vault technology for that. Behavioral monitoring, vulnerability assessment is big. Why wait for something to be exploited and then identify it's been exploited? Let's do monthly scanning and determine whether or not there's a vulnerability that's been identified, and let's patch it. Let's be proactive with those things. Intrusion detection can come from multiple perspectives. We can identify traffic from a gateway device, whether it's a firewall or a router with WAN connectivity to a third-party service. We can also do intrusion detection at the network and the host level, where we actually have an agent doing IDS and IPS on the interface of the virtual machine itself. We can also do file integrity monitoring with that same agent-based solution. So if we know that a virtual machine is a web server, for instance, web servers have certain behaviors when it comes to files that are being changed or files that shouldn't be changed, configuration files, executable permissions on certain directories. These are the types of things that will happen that will be changed if someone maliciously gets access or unsolicited access into a virtual machine. And we're going to know when those things happen. Now, typically when environments are compromised, there's usually a decent period of time before an attacker actually takes action on something. They don't want to hop in and immediately start taking invasive and intrusive action in that environment. So they usually get in, they start digging around, they poke around, let the dust settle, make sure they haven't triggered anything, and sometimes it can be months before they actually take action and do something malicious. In the scenario with Alien Vaults and with the security services that we provide, we're going to know as soon as they get in. So it'll be long before they actually take action and try and do something in most cases. Easy centralized management. So we can position the Alien Vault solution really in almost any environment. And even though it may not be in our RapidScale cloud, we're able to take the interesting security information that's coming from that environment, not sensitive information from the logs, but just the important information from the logs, and that goes into our federation server in our Security Operations Center, so that we can see what customer is having some kind of interesting event, and then we can drill down into the actual installation at the premises and begin digging into that specific warning or whatever the event was. For web security features, multifaceted with the Encapsula solution. I will say that just in the past couple of weeks, Encapsula was reevaluated for their DDoS mitigation services by Forrester, and they moved from being about third in the leader wave to being a pretty clear leader in the leader wave. So they have now been positioned as the leader in the industry for DDoS mitigation services. From a web application firewall perspective, they have been the only product in the leader quadrant for the past 3 years running. So no other product on the market for web application firewall services is deemed reputable enough and worthy of the leader quadrant. So we feel like we have the best product, obviously, for this particular component when it comes to Encapsula and web security. And we can also do infrastructure DDoS mitigation with this portfolio as well. Application level load balancing. We can do geo-targeting, where we can actually take traffic. Let's say you're trying to browse to website.com, and user A is on the west coast of the US, user B is on the east coast of the US, user C is in Europe. And let's just presume that the website.com application that's being delivered can actually be hosted in multiple data centers in an active scenario. The Encapsula solution can take and intelligently route the end user traffic to the nearest data center that's serving out that traffic. Some of that's considered load balancing, but there's also qualifying conditions that can actually fail a data center from a DR perspective as well. So maybe it's active passive, or maybe we just pull that data center out of the hunt so that the users are still able to pull that web page. So happy to have an in-depth conversation about any of these topics, obviously, if you guys have some leads or if you have any questions about it. And the two products do work well together. What we have with Encapsula, we can take the events that are tripped because there's cross-site scripting that was identified from China, or there was some malicious attempt from the Ukraine, just kind of throwing some things out there. Those events can be sent down into the Alien Vault solution so that we can see all of that in a single pane of glass, and we can consider all of that information when we're analyzing and looking at potential malicious activity. The last bullet on here for web security is actually, I think, pretty interesting. While IPv6 really probably should be much more adopted in the internet, and it probably is in a lot of places where we don't realize it, especially when it comes to mobile devices and the Internet of Things. But what we can do with a web page that we put Encapsula in front of is actually provide IPv6 services so that if a client, mobile device, whatever it may be, browsing the internet, is browsing your customer's page, or maybe in this case our customer's page, they will be able to natively pull the content of that web page via IPv6, even though on the back end, the data center hosting facilities, the web server, none of that needs to know anything about IPv6. So we do what's called a 6-to-4 tunnel in the Encapsula cloud and translate that IPv6 request to IPv4 so that we can kind of participate in the IPv6 traffic on the internet. And that is at no included charge. So more specifically to Alien Vault, and I've been kind of talking about some of these things. This is advanced security. It's not $50 a month. It's also very affordable when you have a customer that has the compliances and requirements that drive a security information events manager and drive for vulnerability scanning and being able to do SFlow and NetFlow, IDS and IPS inside the network at the host level. All of these different components of Alien Vault, if you were to price them out with competing solutions, would be very expensive. We not only are able to provide the products, but also the security operations management overlay to that product at a very reasonable cost if you compare it to other solutions. So why USM? We want to know if there's unauthorized parties in the environment. Obviously, that's very important. We want to be able to achieve major compliances, whether it's PCI, HIPAA, any other compliances. This is going to give us this is going to check a lot of boxes in those requirements. Offloading management. I was just recently engaged in an opportunity with a prospect that had already purchased Alien Vault licensing and realized that they didn't want to manage it. So they came to us, and we're now in talks of actually taking over the management, finalizing the implementation and taking over management of the Alien Vault solution. Now, in that particular scenario, we won't have the ability to actually remediate an event, but we're going to be the first eyes to see any kind of events that pop up, and then we'll escalate accordingly to the team that manages, in this case, the AWS environment that serves out their web application. So that's a scenario that we are interested in being involved in. Ultimately, we would love to control the experience all the way around, because it's a more comprehensive and cohesive experience for the end customer if we're able to manage the infrastructure, manage the management of the actual virtual machines, including the security services. But we absolutely are interested in having conversations with prospects that maybe have their own infrastructure somewhere else and just want to deploy these security services at their premises. For the Encapsula product, excuse me, again, very affordable when you look at content delivery services like Akamai. When you look at web security and web application services like maybe Cloudflare, when you look at DDoS mitigation services like Prolexic, which would be back to Akamai and some of the others that are out there, when you look at all of the components that are included in the Encapsula solution, not only are they highly reputable in the industry based on their evaluation of Gartner, Forrester, and some others, they're also very competitive from a price perspective and affordable in my opinion. Now, if you have the barbershop down there that's got a website at GoDaddy, might not be the best opportunity. But when you have businesses where their not only financial reputation are tied to their web application, but also their business reputation tied to their web page, say a credit union, for instance, super important that we have good security in front of those web servers and able to provide some reporting and some real statistics that show your web server was doing a decent job of fending off these things, but it's probably only a matter of time before your site is exploited and ultimately your reputation and maybe even financial is impacted as well. So again, fully managed by RapidScale, implementation and design, implementation, and ongoing management. All right, moving on to Cloud Office. This was a product that we had released at one point. We determined that we had better ways to deliver this based on evolution of technology and the way that the Citrix-based products have evolved and matured over the years. So we re-released the Cloud Office solution this year, and it's really meant for, let's just say, maybe 10 to 50 users that don't really have a super specific application set, customized applications and servers, but just kind of a small office that wants to be able to virtualize, have mobility, isolate their company's data into a secure environment, and ultimately being more productive with those end users. The Cloud Office suite is a great product and a great solution for that. It comes with Microsoft Office included. It comes with the company file share included, and with the Citrix backend with XenDesktop and our management of the Citrix environment, the user profiles and profile management is very streamlined. So great solution, great product. We can actually provide demos of this and an opportunity if you want to test drive it. And it's a desktop. It's not super exciting because it's a desktop, but it's cool when you can log into it from anywhere, from any device. And let's say maybe your laptop breaks or your laptop gets stolen or lost, or you're at a friend's house, you can log in and have the exact same consistent experience on that desktop from wherever you are. And it's also very secure. So some standard features of Cloud Office. It is a Windows 10 desktop experience, which means you log in, you click on the Start button, it looks and feels and is essentially exactly like having a Windows 10 desktop. There is a Windows-based portal for management of deploying additional users, removing users. We are leveraging the Citrix Secure protocol so that it's an efficient delivery of that application and also secure. We do include antivirus and anti-malware protection. Again, I mentioned Office is included. There are some third-party applications that we can stream inside of the desktop. That's a deeper topic to talk about, but it's something that will qualify on the front end and ensure that if they have QuickBooks or they have some other application that they need to leverage besides Microsoft Office, there's no guarantee that we can provide that application streamed into the environment, but we'll have a conversation about it and we'll vet that to ensure that we can before we actually, of course, deliver the solution. Of course, you get Reader and your major web browsers. You get file storage, and of course, file level backup so we can protect the data. So, talked about a couple of these things with Cloud Office, scalability. You get increased security of the business data because it is isolated inside this environment. Very easy to deploy. Typical installation and deployment of Cloud Office is going to be probably less than a week. And that includes us to have an internal kickoff call with the customer, and then logging in and provisioning a basic Cloud Office environment. If we have to stream applications, custom applications into the desktop, they could add some time. But it's very, very quick to deploy because it's already, the infrastructure is already in place. And and this is really more of a general desktop as a service value proposition, but if the company is no longer interested in continuing to buy laptops, but you want to give your employees, or your customer wants to give their employees the opportunity to bring their own MacBook or their own laptop from home, maybe give them a stipend, $100 a month, $200 a month, whatever makes the most sense. So the company is no longer going out and capitalizing not only on the hardware, but having to manage that hardware from an IT perspective. And instead, you have a more consistent experience and more secure experience with a virtual desktop. Moving on to Office 365. This can mean different things to different people. A lot of times when I hear someone reference Office 365, they just assume it means email. Not necessarily the Office bundle, but just assume that it means email. And it doesn't necessarily. You can procure Office 365 licenses, and I should say the Office bundle, without email. You can also procure just Office 365 Exchange Online without the Office bundle. So there's lots of licensing options and different ways to configure the Office 365 licensing based on a customer's or prospect's needs. And that's something that we hop on a phone call with the customer, with the prospect, with you guys, and have those conversations and talk about what makes the most sense. There are a lot of advantages to going through a service provider like RapidScale for Office 365 licensing as opposed to going direct. More flexibility. We're able to mix match licensing, and again, we'll manage that experience for the end user. So we'll manage the Office 365 tenant. If users have problems installing the applications, problems using the applications, they're having problems with email, those are all first level calls that our help desk can take and help resolve. And of course, from a migration perspective, we do email migrations, whether it's into our own multi-tenant platform or if it's up into the Office 365 Exchange Online cloud, we can do that for the customer. So why Office 365? Well, if you remember buying Office licensing from Office Max or CompUSA or wherever it was used to buy it from, or maybe it just came with the computer you bought, if you wanted to upgrade, that was usually a decent expense. With a subscription-based service, and it's not just Microsoft, but specific to Office 365, you're basically paying for whatever the latest and greatest version is that comes out. So you get the latest version with when you get licensing through us in Office 365. You also get a predictable cost. It's not a capital cost that happens every time you deploy a laptop. With some of the Office 365 bundles, you can actually install that user license on up to 5 devices. So that might be an iOS device, Android device, MacBook at home, work laptop, whatever it may be. So that makes it nice and easy and flexible. There's also online versions. So if you're not on one of those computers that you've deployed the application to, you can actually access many of the Office applications just from a web browser. Again, fully managed by RapidScale. So that kind of wraps up the product conversation. One thing that we wanted to bring up is how rapidly we're scaling internally here. And we've added 19 engineers and 8 support staff in the past 11 and a half months. A lot of those people are here in the Raleigh, North Carolina office. I'll say that at the beginning of the year, we had 1 employee in the Raleigh area. And literally on Tuesday of this week, we got our certificate of occupancy for our new office that will hold 30 people. And we feel like we'll already have that full by middle of next year. So we've got almost 20 people just in the Raleigh office that have been added this year. So we're tight right now in shared office space, and we're moving into our brand new office over the holiday period. So we're very excited about that. Keep looking out for blogs and our LinkedIn and tweets for pictures of the new space. And of course, if you're ever in the Raleigh area, please let us know. We'd love to show it off to you. And if you are anywhere near the Raleigh area, please let us know. All right, 2018 technology portfolio. These are things that we've identified over the past several months or this past year, and feel like we need to bring into our portfolio for various reasons. So from left to right, Veeam. We have a little bit of a gap right now between our kind of default backup product and our disaster recovery as a service product. So what Veeam is going to do for us is kind of fill in that middle of the road where we can provide backup services and some maybe lower RTO disaster recovery services between what we call cloud backup and our Zerto-based disaster recovery as a service. Veeam will help us close that gap some. So the other thing that it does is if customers have existing licensing with Veeam and just want to leverage a Veeam cloud provider for what they call Cloud Connector, then we'll be able to do that as well. So that's something that we'll be working on. I don't know exactly what the time frame is, but that will be a 2018 effort. I would say probably look for some type of tech webinar in the second quarter to talk more about that. Object storage is something that I personally am super excited about. If you think about conventional storage, it's going to be some kind of performance, whether it's our default tier, which is very high performance flash-based SSD, or it's going to be a lower cost, lower performance tier. But in both cases, you have to back it up. Now it's primary storage for a reason. You're going to run a virtual machine on it. You're going to have maybe some archive data that you need access to that needs to be halfway decent performance. What object storage does, and you might have heard of S3 with Amazon or blob storage with Azure, it's based on erasure coding. And what that means is we can have multiple frames of storage in multiple geographic locations that manage the location of the bits and bytes of the data, or I should say the bytes of the data, so that if any one of those physical locations or geographic locations were to go offline, the data is still available and it's still available. So not only is it not offline or does it not go away, but it's still available for access. So that eliminates the need for backups from that perspective. We're also going to be fronting the object storage because you have to have some kind of translation that speaks the API. We'll have a front end virtual machine appliance that will allow us to present things like CIF shares, NFS shares, and also add things like snapshots and maybe even versioning and encryption. So a lot of really good stuff when it comes to object storage. What that's going to mean is less than 10 cents per gig and not having to add backup services on top of that. So very excited about that. But multiple terabytes worth of data in there, and it'll be a fraction of what it would have been on primary storage. VMware Horizon DAS is something that I'm not going to say we stumbled across, but in our acquisition of the Vonage iCore business that were deployed into a VMware Horizon-based environment, we have, I guess, essentially acquired the need to support that type of environment, and we're finding that in opportunities where a customer wants Horizon DAS for whatever particular reason, this is going to give us the opportunity to have that conversation and potentially win that business. Also, for customers that have had some kind of expensive deployment of Zero clients that only support the protocol that backends the VMware Horizon product, our barrier to entry was much greater because we didn't have a DAS product or Horizon DAS product, and they would have to replace all of those Zero clients with new hardware. That obviously is not something that most customers would have been that would want to do. So again, it gives us not only options but also compatibility with that existing hardware investment. So that's something that we will be supporting in early 2018. So if that's something that you're interested in, or you think a client is interested in, let us know. Also, there's going to be a big push in 2018 for evolving our portal. When it comes to our portal today, it's really different vendor portals like VMware, Zerto. We have a portal for provisioning of email accounts or Cloud Office. So there's different places to go to manage different products. And it's not new to us, but to know that that experience isn't necessarily optimal. So what we're going to be doing is putting a lot of development dollars into tying those portals together in different ways. It may be that we're deploying SSO for single sign-on so that when you do have to transition from one portal to another, that'll be a more seamless experience. In some cases, it doesn't make sense for us to rewrite a user interface for a portal that has a fully functioning and rather complex features. In other cases, it does make sense for us to do some of those things. So we'll be evaluating that and putting a decent amount of investment into that so that your experience and our customers' experiences are more cohesive. So that is that's it for today. Outside of questions, so we do have one question, and the question is from Daniel, and it says, "Who is your underlying WAN provider?" So we do have backbone connectivity between our data centers. It really kind of is in the background. We don't charge for it. They are 10 gig circuits that tie Irvine to Sterling to Dallas back to Irvine, and also our international data centers in Amsterdam and Hong Kong. I believe that is level 3 wave services, but I don't believe we are exclusive with one provider in that case. So that would be the backbone. Now, it's also possible that the reference was who's your SD-WAN provider. So well, I answered the WAN question. If it was more for SD-WAN, we're leveraging what used to be called Cloud Bridge that Citrix purchased. It's now being rolled into, at least from a marketing perspective, the NetScaler line of products. At some point, I imagine from a code base and management perspective, it'll be more integrated, but that is a NetScaler SD-WAN product if you wanted to look up any of that online. But of course, let your partner experience manager know. Email us at either the marketing email address that was on the very first slide if you want to get more information about the SD-WAN services. So we have another question here. And the question is whether or not our security offerings cover on-premises as well. I have to think about every single one of our security offerings and determine whether or not that's true from a blanket perspective. But just from the products that we talked about today, and actually I'll mention several. So we've got Duo for two-factor authentication that can be tied into services that are not in RapidScale Cloud. I mean, of course, it can be tied into the RapidScale Cloud, but on-premises as well. Mimecast for email security. I often compare Mimecast to Encapsula simply because they're both cloud scrubbing services that eliminate malicious attempts, whether it's email or web attacks, before it gets to your network. Mimecast can be deployed in situations where, say Exchange is going to be on premises. Same thing for Encapsula. Web server could be with Network Solutions. It could be with the marketing company that developed the web page. It could be on premises in a closet in our environment, and we can deploy the Encapsula services on top of that. And then for Alien Vault, there's probably some caveats to whether or not every single scenario would be in scope of being able to deploy the Alien Vault solution into an on-premises environment. But I would say in the lion's share of opportunities and scenarios, yes, we can absolutely deploy Alien Vault down into a customer's premises. And there was a question, I'm not sure exactly what the question is, but it just says SSO question mark. So my guess is, what is SSO? Single sign-on. Basically, it's a way of kind of federating a login so that if you, instead of clicking on a new URL where there's a login and a different username and a different password, and you have to type that in maybe from your password manager, and you go to a different portal and you have to sign into that, different username, different password. What SSO does is it gives us the opportunity to kind of federate all of those services and portals so that you basically are logging into one portal, and then as you click through to these different interfaces, you're automatically logged in with those credentials in that initial login. So hopefully that answers the question about SSO. All right, if there's any more questions after this, please email those in. If you have a partner experience manager that you already have contact with, and please email them. If you get any out of offices, of course, it's because we're out for the holidays, or that person is out for the holidays. Of course, we're not all out for the holidays. 24/7 support always. So keep an eye out for next year's webinars. We'll be getting this put together beginning of January. And thank you very much for joining today. Have a fantastic holiday, and we'll talk to you next year.